Welcome everyone. Once again, I'm Travis Maraska with DQ. I'll be the moderator for the session today, how we can boost accessibility and SEO, search engine optimization at the same time. Your speakers, Ritu and Levi, I'll turn it over to them in just a second. Just let me go over a little bit of housekeeping. For one, this session will be recorded, so you'll have access to that. There, I believe, should be on the event page the ability to download slides. If that's not there, don't hold me accountable just yet. It'll be there once it's probably going through an accessibility process. If we will have live captioning, so depending on the size of your monitor, you may have to scroll a little bit below the live stream video. There'll be captions there that you can customize to your liking in terms of size and font and some other settings like that. To the right of your video player is the Slido Q&A and chat interface. A couple of things about that. There are Q&A is the best place to put a question if you want me to present that to the speakers towards the end. And there's also an upvoting system there. So if people see if you see a question that's similar to one you want to ask, or you think it's a good question, that'll help me if we have too many questions to get to them all. Make sure we get to the most popular questions. Feel free to hang out in the chat as well. We won't be watching that quite as close. So if you have a question, the Q&A is the best place for that. There's also a couple of settings you can adjust between the most popular or the most recent. So if you're maybe a little surprised at what you're seeing, you might want to play with those settings as well. I think that's about it. I'm going to turn it over to your speakers now and go off camera. So Ritu and Levi, take it away. It's all yours.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you everyone for joining us to attend the session on how to boost accessibility and search engine optimization at the same time. My name is Ritu Jaikar. I am UX analyst for Penn State's Outreach and Online Education Unit's Marketing Department. I have been doing accessibility work for the last 12 years. Today I'll be sharing my experience of accessibility compliance in higher education marketing. Co-presenting with me is my colleague, Levi.
Thanks, Ritu. My name is Levi Bloom. I work in the search engine marketing team at Penn State World Campus. And in normal times, I would have been sitting only about 10 feet away from Ritu. My specialty is in search engine optimization, or SEO as we'll refer to it. I've been doing this about 5 years at Penn State, but over 16 years in total, and I'm excited to talk with you about how accessibility and SEO can work together.
So at the end of this presentation, you will be able to identify the common grounds that reinforce both accessibility and SEO. This ground includes page elements, navigation, and responsive design features. Hopefully, you will get one or two tips to get buy-in from your managers for spending time and money to include accessibility practice for your digital content, which also benefit SEO. So what is common in search engine optimization and accessibility? Let us analyze in the context of higher ed. To accommodate the needs of people with disability, WCAG 2.0 and WCAG 2.1 AA standards are accepted by all the universities across higher education institutions. College and university focus on providing equal access to information, programs, activities, be it through web pages, web-based applications, or online instructional material. All digital content should be accessible to all users, no matter what browser, device, or assistive technology they use. Accommodating the needs of students with different ability is the right thing to do. And it also helps education institutes save a lot of time and money from litigations.
So to compare SEO and accessibility, first SEO. SEO is hard to define. Anything you do in order to get your website ranked highly in search engines, it can all be considered SEO. Now, comparing accessibility to SEO, we have accessibility, which advocates for ease of use and equal access to information by people with different abilities. And we have SEO, which is about rankings and click-throughs. There's a lot more profit motive on this side. Specifically, the overall goal with SEO is to get as many visitors to your website as possible by ranking highly in search engine results. And because these people are actively searching for what you offer and clicking on your website in the search results, they should be highly targeted and thus very valuable. So once these people arrive, we don't want to give them any reason to leave. If the site is not accessible, that could be a good reason to leave. Therefore, the website should be accessible to everyone, meaning there's great SEO value to accessibility work.
There are different reasons why accessibility and SEO practices are adopted in higher ed marketing. Both strive to maximize the user base, and both want to make web content readable by the machines. These machines could be screen readers or search bots. SEO and accessibility have a common goal of reaching as many users as possible. To achieve this goal, they need to develop machine-compatible interface.
On the technical side, we actually have two audiences when it comes to SEO. It's not just the people visiting the site. Because before you can get actual people visiting your site from search engines, you have to get your website indexed and ranking in those search engines. And to do that, you rely on something called search engine spiders. Essentially, these are machines that visit your website and they crawl through it and then render it and then decide if they'll index your pages. We'll say Googlebot, for instance, which is the name of Google's web crawler. We really want Googlebot to see and understand our pages. Now, being a machine, Googlebot doesn't have eyes, so in a sense, it might process your site a lot like a screen reader would. You could spend a lot of time learning about just this piece of SEO, but you're better off talking to Google engineers when it comes to that. So I'm not going to get into the specifics there. The point is, with these similarities between search engine bots and assistive technology, accessibility is super important for SEO. And having an accessible website will help ensure that your website is indexed by all the major search engines. You have Google, Bing, Yahoo, DuckDuckGo, and more.
As you all know, accessibility practice is based on core user-centered principle, or perceivable. No matter which assistive technology student access the content, it is perceivable. Students should be able to understand and interact with the content using keyboard or mouse. Content is simple and understandable. HTML code is robust enough to render content across different platforms, devices like laptops, phones, iPads. It's very easy to implement these principles if you adopt them proactively and integrate them in the initial design discussions, information architect, and website code. We have adopted such an approach at our institution. Majority of our accessibility needs are met if we provide relevant title for each page, follow heading hierarchy in the page with meaningful links, accessible files and PDFs, intuitive navigation, which support keyboard-friendly interaction, non-text elements like image, audio, video, have alternative text, transcripts, and captions, which can be read by different assistive technologies. Overall, build websites with clean and valid HTML, keeping the user-centered design practices in mind.
If you look at this list for SEO, you'll see it's practically a mirror image of what you should be doing for accessibility. The reasoning behind each piece isn't necessarily the same, because of slightly different outcome goals usually, but for the work you're doing to the website, it's all very similar. A large portion of SEO really is as simple as making an accessible, user-friendly website. Sure, there are many other areas to SEO. It's a very broad field. In addition to this on-page SEO, there's also off-page SEO, and there you work with factors generally outside of your control. But today we'll focus on the technical side of things and the on-page SEO where we overlap. Next, we'll start to look at each one of these in detail.
Title, our first page element. Each web page has titles that describe the topic or the purpose of the page. Titles are not very obvious and hardly used by our sighted users. They can have multiple tabs open on the same window and still navigate with ease from one tab to another. But screen reader users depend on the title of the page to move to the correct tab. If titles are duplicated or missing, it would be very difficult for screen readers to find the right page. Best practice is to add accurate and concise title that refer to the content of the page. Don't rely on your CMS to pick the title for you. Set the title tag structure to something like page title followed by the site title, which will help screen readers read the new information first, like admission Penn State, courses Penn State, and so on.
Now, while most people already on the website will hardly notice that page title, the page title is front and center in the SERPs. The SERPs, as we call them, are search engine results pages. That's sort of a fancy way of saying search results, but it refers specifically to the presentation of those results for the users. Anyway, your page title is the first thing people are going to see, and that's a big factor in whether or not they'll click through to your website. It's both a descriptive title of your page and an advertisement for your page. That's to do double duty. So it needs to include relevant keywords, especially your most important keyword, and it should be enticing enough to make people want to click. So you just saw the example of our homepage title. That works for people familiar with our brand, if they're searching for Penn State World Campus, as well as other people in our target market who might be looking for degree certificates and courses offered online. No clickbait needed, though. But keep in mind, the search engines only allot you so many pixels, so you only have approximately 55 to 60 characters to work with when you're writing your titles. Anything beyond 55 to 60 characters is usually truncated and replaced by an ellipsis in the SERPs. It might even be replaced or rewritten. But if you have accessibility at top of mind and your title is accurate and concise, you're all set. To make this easier, you might want to use some type of SEO plugin that goes with your CMS. In our case, we use meta tag module for Drupal and the Yoast plugin for WordPress.
Headings. Headings organize information and help quickly scan the page. These can be added in two ways. One by changing the font size and type and color, well, more popular among us. Second, by adding HTML markup H1, H2, H3. In both cases, page will look exactly the same, and for sighted users will have no problem. They will have the same user satisfaction, but not for the screen reader users. Without H1, H2 markups, it'll be a wall of continuous text. Screen readers will read the entire text from top left to the bottom of the page. They will not be able to scan the page using shortcut keys to find headings or generate heading list window to jump from heading to heading. Proper hierarchy of heading is helpful too in quickly locating the details of sections and subsections. Rule of thumb is to have at least one H1 and not to skip levels of headings to avoid confusion.
All of your page content is important for SEO, but due to the extra prominence of headings, many people believe they are extra important for SEO. So get your important keywords in here too. Now, what keywords are we talking about? You have plenty of options. You could use your main keywords, or you could use variations of them, or you could use other important subtopics. They're all good ideas. Just think about what your user would want to find out. The main point here is to use the headings in the first place. Now, probably the biggest case for using headings is they make a page more user-friendly. They make the page scannable, easier to digest, and being scannable is good for all users, because almost everyone wants a page they can scan through quickly, because time is valuable. Who isn't in a hurry to get the information they're looking for? You want to make the info easy to find so that people will stick around until they find it. If people show up to your site and immediately hit the back button to go back to the Google search results and ultimately choose a different website, Google can use that as a signal that your website shouldn't be ranking so highly for the search query. There's also a theme here with keyword usage when it comes to ranking better in search engines. Now, Google is smart. It knows that if a keyword's here in the title and the headings, it must be important. There's no faking it. As opposed to a bunch of keywords in the site's footer in a very small font size, or worse, keywords the same color as the background. The days of sneaking keywords into your site like that are long gone. And that's good news for accessibility, as Ritu will explain shortly.
Content. Content is a king of the digital world. Many attributes contribute towards its regal status, like font face, size, color, alignment, and the language used. Keep the language simple, jargon-free, concise, and subject-appropriate to help readability of the page and minimize the cognitive load on the user. Best practices to choose font which makes it easy to distinguish the number and the letters, and nothing too small. Research shows that left-aligned text is easier to read as it has the predictable starting point for each line. Avoid justified text, which is more difficult to read because of the extra spacing in between. Color of the font is important, as not all users see the color equally. Color is ignored by the screen readers. So make sure color is not the only medium to convey information in the text or graphs. Use good contrast between background and foreground. As you know, guidelines are to use minimum ratio of 4.5:1 to text to help the low vision users. Along with the font face, size, and the color contrast, letter spacing and line spacing also contribute to better readability. Recommendations are to have spacing of 1.5 times of font size in between the lines.
Everything that you're doing for accessibility, improving readability, making content easy to understand, reducing cognitive load, that all makes it less likely for a user to bounce, and that's a good thing for SEO. Remember, don't give your users a reason to leave. So many factors go into how the search engines choose the best content. We couldn't possibly cover them all in this presentation. But I really want to emphasize the jargon piece, because oftentimes, especially for us in higher education, we are very guilty of this. We write in these ways to demonstrate our expertise and our vocabulary, rather than writing in language that our site visitors will easily understand. It's marketing content. It's not a thesis. It's not a patent application. I also highly suggest that you do some keyword research to find out what your target market is searching for. If you're not doing basic keyword research, you might end up putting a lot of effort into writing content that no one ever reads. Then you're just wasting your time. Now, there are free keyword research tools that are pretty good. And you can get ideas from some things you might be using already, like Google Analytics. They have internal site search data that you can collect. Google Search Console, that is actual search queries provided by Google. Those are free. There's no excuse to skip this step. So if you make your content accessible and you remember that you're writing to your prospective visitors, you should do well.
A picture is 1,000 words, but not for the assistive technology if these pictures do not have all text. Web pages have a lot of non-textual content to add the visual appeal to present information in the best possible format. All non-textual content, photos, graphs, illustrations, need to be interpreted for assistive technology and bots. Adding alternative text, which is invisible on the pages, help machines read these visual elements. As you all know, images used for decorative purposes can make note by the machines if properly tagged. If not, screen readers read the file names.
Alt text can be very helpful for SEO as well. And it's yet another place to put your important keywords. You have to do this in a considerate manner, though, because if you just stuff keywords into the alt text, that's going to be annoying for someone with a screen reader. So you want to balance SEO and accessibility. So you can place keywords in there, but still have the alt text serve its true function of describing the image. Now, there's even a potential SEO benefit from making your keywords part of your file name. For example, you could have keyword hyphen 0027.jpg. That's probably better than image 0027.jpg. And if that happens to help your content writers and editors find relevant images within your media libraries, all the better. So good alt text can also help you in image search, potentially opens up your site to even more visitors. And finally, make sure your images are optimized to ensure fast loading pages. That has an impact on your page load speed, and we know Google is prioritizing core web vitals this year. And really, who would not appreciate a fast loading website?
Like images, videos are excellent medium to tell stories, promote campus life, or bring the class lectures online. As Heaven Germa mentioned yesterday, nowadays a popular trend is to upload informative videos more often online. Adding the transcript and captions helps screen reader with these videos. People with cognitive and learning disabilities can also benefit from it, and so are ESL learners. Most popular video platforms like YouTube and Vimeo allow to add the transcript and captions for videos. Users can control the transcript and captions displayed with video controls. If you are adding video as iframe, it is good practice to add the title attribute in iframe code so that the screen reader can announce it instead of reading the file name of the video, similar to the image example Levi mentioned earlier.
In SEO, we always want more content on our pages, because in general, more content means more opportunities to rank in the search engines. And text content is just the easiest content for search engines to process. So having transcripts for your video and or audio provides a lot of text content for the page. This can even be really simple to implement because you can probably take your closed captioning file and post that text as a transcript.
Links. It's safe to say that links have revolutionized the information. They connect text, images, audios, videos, and the era. But not all links are the same. Some links can be more accessible than the other. Best practice is to add informative href so links make sense without the context of the accompanying text. It is beneficial on two counts. Visually, if you make click here as links instead of the scholarship form, user would not know the purpose of the link. So avoid linking the content that is not related to the link. Secondly, screen readers use keyboard shortcuts to pop up a link list window. Multiple read more, click here links are confusing and require complicated strategies to understand the page and purpose of links. If you link the complete URL as a link, screen reader will read out loud each letter, number, dash, and hyphens, making it difficult to understand the destination of the link. Make links user-friendly. Good contrast between the link color and the adjacent color would help low-vision user to visually identify links. Best practice is to have the contrast at 3:1. As mentioned earlier, links are interactive elements and keyboard users need a visual clue to know when they tap to links. All browsers have default focus, but it is different across browsers. Adding custom focus to links can provide similar experience across browsers and easy identification of links. Another best practice is to open links in a single window as much as possible. If links open in a new window, user cannot use back button or navigate back without closing the new window, which can be more confusing in mobile interfaces. If you have to open a link in a new window, add the textual indication for screen readers like link opens in a new window or external link. This is some of the example of that.
Links serve many purposes. That's why they're so critical to SEO. If I could, I'd wrap this part of the presentation in an H1 heading. I'd make it strong. I'd even make it blink or marquee across the page if that wasn't such a terrible user experience. Instead, I'll just say, please pay very close attention to your links. Why is that? First, they aid in crawling and discovery, helping the search engine bots find your pages. So that's going to be in your navigation menu, which we'll talk about more in a moment, as well as other links throughout your content. And quick aside while we're on the topic, let's not forget your URL structure. Google recommends that you use simple, human-readable, and logical URL paths. Basically, they're saying to use words rather than a bunch of question marks and parameters, because those could put you in situations where Google may have trouble crawling and indexing all your content. So if you have simple URLs and lots of links, Google should be able to crawl your site. The second thing links do, links help determine the authority or importance or popularity of your web pages. In the simplest terms, the more links a page has, the more important the page. And search engines use popularity scores like this to help them rank the best pages at the top. They're very secretive of the details, though. Third, links provide context. The link anchor text signals the relevance of the page. So as Ritu mentioned, use actual descriptive keywords in your anchor text, not just click here or read more. There's no context from that. So make sure the anchor text is long enough that the user knows what they're clicking to, but it's not so long that it includes extraneous words and it ends up diluting the meaning. So those are the basics of linking. If you can get that right, you're better off than most websites. Even that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Navigation. Easy, predictable navigation enhances user experience. Keep the diverse user base in mind while designing your navigation. Remember, people with low vision can zoom the page by 200%. Check the design to make sure no information is lost or overlapping, and there is no horizontal scroll bar at the bottom, and no functionality of the page is compromised. Best user experience for keyboard user is to access all page elements without any keyboard traps. User can tab from top left of the page in sequential order with a visible focus. Focus helps user to identify the active elements, which is possible only with visible change in design, like a border, background, color change, or a combination of these two. The default browser setting or focus are not sufficient to keep up with the modern page designs.
As Ritu mentioned, you want to keep a diverse user base in mind while designing your navigation. We talked about Googlebot earlier. Googlebot is part of that user base. Just like a person, Googlebot needs a way to find all of your web pages. As we mentioned earlier, it uses links to do that. So you need these links on your website, and what better way to accomplish that than with the navigation menu? You simply need regular hyperlinks, nothing fancy, just your trusty Ahref. No extra work is required. So if your site is keyboard navigable, then it's going to be easy for Googlebot to crawl to.
Use of mobile devices is on the rise. According to Pew Research, 81% of Americans own smartphones, and roughly 1 in 5 American adults today is smartphone-only internet user. WebAIM survey shows that iOS devices are very popular among people with disabilities. So it is important to make sure that the web pages are mobile-friendly. Some assistive technologies require to mount a device on a certain orientation. So it is important that content flow is device and orientation independent. WCAG 2.1, implemented in June 2018, reinforced this user experience.
These days, because of that rise in mobile device usage, Google's using mobile-first indexing. And that means when they're looking at your website, they're looking at the mobile version. Now, if you have a responsive website that meets accessibility requirements and the content or the links on the same regardless of the screen size, you should be fine. But if not, your Google rankings could suffer. So I would make it a top priority to improve mobile friendliness. So as you saw, there's some overlap between accessibility and SEO, but some things you do for accessibility have little to no impact on SEO, and vice versa. As you can see in this diagram, it's not a total overlap. You have ARIA labels, they won't help your SEO, the meta description, it won't help your accessibility. But for the things that do overlap, those are key, because they can benefit both SEO and accessibility. So if you're having trouble getting buy-in for your accessibility projects, make sure you add in all the relevant SEO benefits that could be realized by doing your accessibility work. Combined, they can lead to more traffic to your site and less risk for an accessibility violation. Now, working in SEO, I feel your pain. We have similar struggles getting buy-in. For example, a lot of decision makers want clear-cut results. They want hard numbers. They want to know they can invest X dollars and get Y amount of exposure. With SEO, we don't have that clarity. There are a lot of estimates. There's a lot of work to be done behind the scenes before you even begin to reap the rewards. And then things change all the time. Search engines are always moving the goalposts. But that level of uncertainty, not everyone's going to jump on the SEO bandwagon, especially when I tell them I can't get results overnight. So I might need to stress the accessibility, like we too might have to stress the SEO benefits. It's so important for SEO and accessibility coworkers to join forces.
There is much more to SEO and accessibility than what we covered here, but we hope you found some common practices that you can implement to boost accessibility and SEO of your websites. Here are some free resources which we use and find useful. As you can see there, some common tools like Lighthouse, Screaming Frog, which are used for both SEO and accessibility. We would like your feedback and comments on or any questions you have for me or Linvan. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys so much. We've got a good 19 minutes for questions, and we've got a lot of them. Again, if you participants see questions in the Q&A that you like, make sure to upvote those, because I'm going to, not dissimilar to SEO, sort of use that to rank the popularity of the questions that I'll pose to our speakers. So let's take this one from John. He asks, do you know of any concrete examples of improved SEO for a company post-accessibility? And by post-accessibility, I assume remediation or consideration. Like where a company's views improved based solely on integration of accessibility considerations. This info the awesome ammunition when trying to advocate for accessibility. And there are a few more questions that kind of follow that pattern of questions of thinking.
I'll start on that one. That is a fantastic question. The one thing I will start off with is, unfortunately, I don't have any great data to share on that one. If I find some, I will be very happy. Let me know if you find any. Because one thing that I would typically say in a situation like this is just that, and I think I alluded to it, so many SEO projects, because SEO ties into accessibility, the content, the rest of the web development team. There's so many little pieces all around, and you have to get the really all of those little pieces right and in place to really see the results. So unfortunately, I think it would be more rare that you would find a situation where just adding SEO to accessibility would have the concrete results. I guess it's more possible if you have if you do a large project all at the same time, you could probably get it. But unfortunately, in our case, we have so many projects, and we just we have to get the little bits of accessibility and SEO in there when we can. So there's usually no big influx of SEO and accessibility work that we get to see the results right away.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, it sounds like you'd have to almost set that experiment up beforehand to get the real data, right? Because it's hard to measure. Here's another really popular question. This is WCAG or WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, say that identical text and image links that are close together, i.e. like a product listing, should be combined into a single link, or one link should be hidden from screen readers so that those assistive technology users avoid repeated content. Are there negative SEO implications to this, especially hiding one of those links? And by hiding, I believe that the person means from AT, like ARIA hidden or something like that.
I would say no. I would say there's no issue with that. The link, having one link instead of two would be totally fine in SEO purposes. And having, in general, I mean, hidden content is something to be careful of, but when it's done in a way for accessibility, I think Google's usually good. A lot of the Google representatives are very fond of accessibility work. And I think in general you would be safe to do that. I can't speak for every scenario, but as far as I know, you would not run into SEO issues with that.
Gotcha. This one's going to be a little bit of a curveball, but I'm staying true to my upvoting, and it's popular. And I don't know anything about this myself. It says, how big of a role will good web accessibility scores play in the May 2021 Google SEO algorithm update, which I didn't know about until this question was posed. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, I give you just a quick background on the upcoming May update. Is going to be based on what Google's calling core web vitals, which is essentially the user experience, like your page load time and whether or not the layout shifts while you're using a website, things like that. There are three specific things they're looking at. That's a really good question because I haven't tried to tie this to what I know about accessibility. So Ritu and I haven't chatted about this either. We do have the rest of our web developers are working on it. I think
performance is a big part of that for one, load times and things like that, and sounds like some other usability factors that could have accessibility overlap, but unsure exactly which success criteria. Is that fair?
Yeah. I would say definitely tie the two together. I think there's enough correlation that they could really make the case for it, and it would be a very solid argument that accessibility should be considered if you're putting changes in place in advance of the core web vitals update in May.
Yes, and also I think everything is getting reinforced by that, because the way content will be on different viewport independent, because they're desktop and they zoom it is mobile interface, you have to be mindful of that. And another thing Google is going to pay attention is to the touch area, it's 48x, so which is everybody, we are making sure that all our new designs follow that pattern so that a proactive process has really begun.
Great, thank you. quite a lot of questions about transcripts and media. So here's one from Gina. Is it redundant or considered duplicate content if you have a transcript on a video page in HTML as well as closed captioning that's within the video player itself? And I think the question is leaning towards, is it considered duplicate content for SEO purposes?
Okay, so my thoughts on this one, another great question. I think in a lot of situations, the closed caption file might not be easily read by Googlebot or other search engine spiders. So they're probably only going to see the text transcript. I think if you put both and they were reading both, they would most likely, and of course it could differ in certain situations. Sometimes we just have no idea how Google's going to take something. I think in general they would figure out that you are doing it with I think it would be easy to see that it's two different types of content. It's not really done in a malicious manner.
Right. Like this is an SRT, we know why they're doing this. And of course, until people start to abuse it, and then Google may adjust accordingly, right?
Yeah, that's true. If anything gets abused, then the whole game could change, and everything. Everything.
We all remember that white-on-white text from back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue, and that was a good answer. Thank you. There's another question from John, and I think this is more of a tactful question. I think he knows the technical answer, but it's more about how you approach this. So it says, regarding page titles, how do I convince clients not to keyword stuff their title elements and ensure they're succinct and descriptive of the content on the page?
This is a very point of view. You need to have a small title so that it doesn't read like a sentence.
Long screen reader. Yeah.
So it will get truncated if it is way too long, even when you are going to hover over it.
So would you say that would be one where you could pair the two together, accessibility and SEO, and I think it was Levi that talked about there's a balance, there's a kind of a dance there, because the keyword stuffing search engines aren't going to fall for that these days anyway, right? And it's going to create a bad experience for an assistive technology user.
Totally. Yeah, I would, working with clients and stakeholders and convincing them, especially if they have certain ideas that contradict yours, can be very interesting. That's one of the challenges you always run into, even when you have if you have your SEO skills down, managing the relationship with clients is always interesting.
I've been doing this for 16 years isn't a good enough answer.
Yeah. That doesn't often work. One of the tips I have is just to see if there's anything in particular they like. So I know I work with a lot of people who are very interested in what competitors are doing. So say your client is, always likes to keep on top of their competitors. I would look for other competitors that might have, they might be using titles that are more, more practical, more what you would say, not just a keyword subtitle. I think there are a lot of examples, even if you had to go to a different industry, you could find a lot of good examples of companies that have much more desirable page titles and get the screenshots in the SERPs and show how they look. And then, compare that to just the visual presentation of, more keyword subtitle, maybe Photoshop some stuff where there's some, keyword subtitles in with other ones that look a lot better. And then by putting them next to each other that you can kind of see it, you don't want the client to have their website get a bad reputation or look shady compared to what the other competitors are doing there. So I would try some examples like that if you could.
Interesting angle. Okay. Yeah, the competition is always a way to get a response if the technical answer doesn't work. Great. Okay. see. I think we have time for a couple more. Here's one that's interesting. If my image or my JPEG or PNG image consists of a photo with the words or text of a poem, what is the best practice? Should it have alt text plus a description? Assume the image is a lion and the poem is about birds. So there's an interesting content question.
So there are various ways, like alt text. It's a very interesting topic, very simple, still very complex, because it depends what practices not to literally give the alt text of the image, but its reference. Like why you're using it. So if it's an image of the poem, you will have to write all the text on it. But depending on what page you are including in, we try to give the example of our redesign shrine. You can talk about the shrine or who was the sculpture or their practices about the Penn State footballs. So you have to see the reference on which the page is embedded. So it's the relevance of the image on the page, what it carries, can be two different things. The same image can have a different alt text.
Okay. Any best practices on character limits that you feel are important? I know screen reader behavior has changed quite a bit, but from an SEO perspective?
From an SEO's perspective, I usually just go with try to follow the accessibility guidelines. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, like 8 to 12 words is probably the max that you could fit in there.
Yeah, Jaws used to break it up if you put too many and read it about twice and do some weird stuff like that. So, okay, that's interesting. So those are pretty good overlap between those two best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what we have left. Here's one. I might have conjured this by mentioning that white-on-white text earlier. This just came in. Do you consider white-on-white text is the same as hiding text using techniques like CSS clip properties? Will that be treated as poorly from an SEO perspective? Because a lot of times that is used for accessibility purposes, like off-screen text or clip rect or something like some technique like that.
Yeah, it's very relevant. Definitely a lot of that happening now, especially with the shift to mobile. I think this was a big issue for a while. I think Google's got it mostly ironed out. I wouldn't be surprised if they have issues with some things. But I think that in general, anytime you're putting the text off the screen or hiding it for legitimate purposes, waiting for the right time to show it for the user and things like that, I think in general that's going to be fine. I think Google's mostly looking at that, and I think this is one of the reasons they like to have access to your JavaScript and CSS files, so that they can really look at how you're displaying it. So I think at this point, they're going to make a good distinction between when you're doing that properly versus the malicious style. And I would assume if you're, it also ends up being, proper content versus a list of keywords that might have been more common in days of the same color text and back.
I don't envy the people who maintain these algos, right? Because it's like, are we doing this for good or bad reasons? Like, I think we might have time for one more. This is interesting. I actually would like to know the correct answer to this. This is from Anonymous, and it says, do you know if an element with role equals heading, ARIA level equals 1, so using ARIA to tell the screen reader it's a heading instead of traditional H tag, will be considered by a search engine bot as the same as a traditional H1?
No.
My initial answer for this, and I'm not claiming it to be absolutely correct, is that I'm pretty sure that the search engines are going to skip over those ARIA labels. So I think if they I think for them it would be a lot easier if you have an actual H1 tag in there.
Maybe you might need some further. I've seen this technique quite a bit when the content is kind of already locked semantically, and people will use JavaScript to apply those decorations to get it to an accessible state. The screen reader would totally read that as a heading level 1, but maybe Google might not be quite as adhering to the ARIA spec. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think, and this is just based on comments I've heard and read from some of the Google spokespeople, their webmaster trends analysts, as they personally advocate for accessibility, but in terms of how it gets used in the algorithms and how they're analyzing it in your pages, that it's probably just skipped over. So not for neither good nor bad, just that's not something they're taking into consideration.
So when in doubt, use the traditional heading element whenever possible, 1 through 6. And I can vouch for this technique for accessibility, but you might not get the SEO weight that you would like. Okay. With that, I think we are going to be out of time for questions. We got through most of them. Again, you guys can download these the slides from the session page, and the contact information that you see on the screen, for those of you who can see the screen, is also going to be in there. So if you want to reach out to our wonderful speakers, please feel free to do that. And to Levi, thank you so much for the talk today, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of AXCon. I'm not going to sign off because our production guys asked us to wait for the all clear. Ended right at done time.